The Bible Treasury. A monthly magazine of papers on scriptural subjects. Volume 19, Article 1, Part 83 of 93, 1892 and 1893. The Early Chapters of Genesis. By William Kelly. Genesis 10 verse 31. Subsequent statements in the book of Genesis give particulars of other families of the Shemitic stock who entered the Arabian Peninsula. All that is intended here is to fill up the general view of its denizens, in order to complete the picture, in this measure anticipating what follows our chapter. As sons of Cush were the first to settle within it, chiefly on the Persian Gulf and the southwest coast skirted by the Red Sea, before Joktan and his sons possessed themselves so largely of its borders and interior, we may notice first Ishmael and his sons as a most characteristic class of the dwellers in Arabia. No prediction of the kind has been more signally fulfilled than Genesis 16 verse 12, he will be a wild ass of a man, his hand against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell before the face of all his brethren. In vain has the skeptical Gibbon, Decline and Fall, chapters 46 and 50, strained his ingenuity to get rid of their standing independence, felt alike by strangers and by natives. There it is to this day, as it has been through all history. Of whom else can it be pretended similarly? The overruling power of God, as always, has guarded his word. Ishmael, though in no way the line of covenant any more than Esau, has lived before him. Other peoples, and conspicuously in their neighborhood, have dwindled and disappeared. I do not say they are extinguished. Ishmael, he made fruitful and a great nation. In this world, as it is, no sane person denies checks or exceptions during the course of ages, when God was ignored or misrepresented. But even the infidel historian had to acknowledge that these exceptions were temporary or local. The body of the nation has escaped the yoke of the most powerful monarchies. The arms of Sesostris and Cyrus, of Pompey and Trajan, could never achieve the conquest of Arabia. The present sovereign of the Turks may exercise a shadow of jurisdiction, but his pride is reduced to solicit the friendship of a people, whom it is dangerous to provoke and fruitless to attack. The wilderness of Paran was the earliest seat of Ishmael, but his posterity extended completely across the northern parts of Arabia, including the district of Sinai on the west to the Euphrates. In this district, the sons of Keturah also dwelt, and thus Ishmaelites or Hagarites got mixed up with Midianites, as we may see in Genesis 37 verses 25 to 28 and 36, Judges 8 verses 22 to 26, 1 Chronicles 5 verse 20. Nebaioth, Ishmael's firstborn, gave his name to the large region of Arabia Petrea, where Josephus places all the other sons. But this is too limited, for they settled also south of what the ancients called Nabathea or Nabateus. They bred camels, and kept sheep, as they were also merchants in aromatics and other commodities. Like other rationalists, Gibbon imputes their love of independence to their accidental locality. It was rather their wild character which availed itself of rocks and deserts, and God so acted as to suit both to his word and will. Here too the Edomites, or sons of Esau, found their place in Mount Seir. The second of Ishmael's sons was Kedar, from whom Mohammed proclaimed his descent through the tribe of Quraysh, the Cetrii of Pliny, Qadrati or Qadronati from time immemorial living in the Hejaz, as the Beni Iconaz dwelt and still dwell in the interior northeast, who are called in modern times the Enizi, descendants of Esau, the largest, as Burckhardt says, of all the Bedouin tribes of Arabia, at constant feud with the Joktanites south of them, as their progeny are to this day. Some of the other sons of Ishmael may be more or less obscure, but this cannot be said of Duma, who had also the characteristic title of Beni Kalb, as the Kedarites were correspondingly styled Beni Karb, and Tema, written large and deep in the northern part of the Negud, as the interior highlands of Arabia are called among themselves. There is no intention at this point to give more than a general notion of the relation of the Ishmaelites and other Abrahamidae to the previous settlers in Arabia. But it is well to bear all in mind, as each race had its influence on the circumstances and history of a land remarkably divided. These are the sons of Shem, after their families, after their tongues, in their lands, after their nations. Verse 31. Blessing in the prophecy of Noah was assigned to Shem, or more strictly the word was, blessed be Jehovah, the God of Shem. So it has been, so faith knows now, so it will be completely fulfilled when Christ makes the truth indisputable in glorious results to every eye. This is not the design of God either by the gospel or in the church, it is reserved for the age to come. The notion of such as Renat, History Ga copyright Na copyright Roald de Lange's essay copyright MIT, that the Shemitic races were to be in purpose or in fact monotheistic is a delusion. As the Adamic condition of innocence yielded to sin, so did the post-Diluvian government of the world break down, and God's judgment of the earth with which it was preceded was soon darkened and perverted to serving other gods. Ham may lead the way, as beyond doubt the beginning of Nimrod's kingdom was Babel, but Ashur soon followed in the same path, not of ambition only but of idolatry, and the very family of him that was chosen to be the father of the faithful were thus corrupted when the call of God called him out to bless him and make him a blessing to all families of the earth. Joshua 24 verse 2. Thus no flesh can glory in itself or its ways. Let him that glories glory in Jehovah. Even Max Muller, though far from believing reverence, is compelled by overwhelming facts to abandon the rationalistic dream and to pay in a measure at least to the truth, as another has culled out of his chips out of a German workshop, I 345. Can it be said that a monotheistic instinct could have been implanted in all those nations which adored Elohim, Jehovah, Sabaoth, Moloch, Nisroch, Rimmon, Nebo, Dagon, Ashtaroth, Baal or Bel, Baal Peor, Baal Zebub, Chemosh, Milcom, Adramelech, Anamelech, Nibhaz and Tarduk, Ashima, Nergal, Sukkot-Benoth, the sun, the moon, the planets, and all the host of heaven. Shemitic races worship these and more. In the same work, M.M. goes farther still in his disproof. Nor is it possible to explain on merely historical grounds how the Hebrews first obtained and so persistently clung to this grand first truth. Their chronicles show continual lapses into idolatry, and yet they always recovered themselves, till at last, after a bitter discipline of national calamities, they finally turned with enthusiastic devotion to the worship of Jehovah. Reference to a primitive religious instinct in mankind is as little satisfactory, for though there must have been such an intuitive sentiment in the earliest men as the basis of their future idolatries, it could only have impressed on them the existence of some divine being, but in no degree involved the conception of that being, as one and one only, but as all history proves, tended to the very opposite. Nor can it be said that the Hebrew worked out the great truth by a profound philosophy, for no contrast could be greater between the Jewish mind and that of other nations of antiquity sprung from a different stock, than the utter absence from it of the metaphysical speculations in which other races delighted. Yet, while all nations over the earth have developed a religious tendency which acknowledged a higher than human power in the universe, Israel is the only one which has risen to the grandeur of conceiving this power as the one, only, living God. Better still is his closing confession, if we are asked how it was that Abraham possessed not only the primitive conception of the divinity as he has revealed himself to all mankind, a very questionable proposition, corrected anticipatively in Romans 1 verses 19 and 20, but passed, through the denial of other gods, to the knowledge of the one God, we are content to answer that it was by a special divine revelation, IBI 372. When the Anointed came, he tested this enthusiastic devotion to the worship of Jehovah, and proved, as Isaiah had testified long before, that in vain the people worshipped him, teaching as doctrines the precepts of men. For had they learned of the Father they would have come to Christ, but they knew neither the Son nor the Father who sent him. Who is the liar but he that denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist that denies the Father and the Son. Whosoever denies the Son has not the Father either, he that confesses the Son has the Father also. 1 John 2 verses 22 and 23. The day is at hand when the worthlessness of Jewish devotion even to monotheism, or rather to their Elohim, or Jehovah, will be manifest. For, as the rejected Messiah warned, The unclean spirit of idolatry which they then thought and still think exorcised forever, will return to his house empty, swept, and garnished, and just because it is empty, instead of filled with his presence who is Jehovah as well as Messiah. Yea more, he will take to himself in that day, for it is not yet fulfilled, 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter and dwell there, and the last state of that man becomes worse than the first. Even thus shall it be also to this wicked generation. Matthew 12. To banish idols and judge idolatry forever is reserved for the Lord in the day of his appearing.